Hello and welcome to the Extreme Perspectives podcast. We bring you conversations with people who see things differently and think differently. The innovators, outliers, misfits, rebels, and the crazy ones from the Sense Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Brown. I seek out extreme perspectives of people who want to change things and push the human race forward. Together, we collaborate with the world's most innovative companies to help them to be more innovative. Today, we're talking to the outlier, globetrotter, creative turned data scientist, Nicholas Kuhn from Kuala Lumpur. Keep listening as we discuss data odysseys and possibility engines, new ways to fail, and why he is preparing his young sons to go to space. Morning, Nick. How are you doing?
Morning, Jeremy. Lovely to speak to you this morning.
And thanks for joining us. We'll get straight into it. I'd love you to tell us a little bit about yourself, who, where, what. But before we do that, are you an outlier, misfit, rebel, or crazy one?
Well, depending on whether you speak to my wife or my staff, I suppose it will differ. I suppose an outlier in one sense. I've moved from the creative industry into the data science industry. And always had a great love of futurism and trying to understand what the next is. So yeah, from that outlier, mixing a variety of disciplines together, I think is where I'd fit. I'm not necessarily a specialist or a visionary in one particular area, but I try and look at really more being a pioneer in certain areas. And the pioneers are great at starting things, but not necessarily the ones you want managing a town or a project for the rest of your life. You need to move on to something else. So I'm always looking for the next big thing, trying to be the first in there. And then I let the folks who are very professional and very good at what they're doing take on from there so that I can get my interest back into something new.
Well, the world needs outliers and visionaries, Nick. That's excellent. Where are we speaking to you today?
So I'm on a very busy street. So if you hear noisy motorbikes, I curse at them every evening at 2:00. I'm in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia.
But that doesn't sound like that's your native home. It sounds like you might have been on a bit of a journey. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I was born in a very interesting place where Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings, was born in Bloemfontein, of all places. So I grew up in a farming area, and then moved to the metropolis of Johannesburg and did my schooling over there, went to the UK and did my A-levels, came back to South Africa and did an advertising and communications degree. And quite early on realized that the South African market was going under quite a lot of changes. So I had an opportunity to move to Nigeria and start a research, train up a local company in market research, specifically in the youth market. That was interesting. That was before cell phones. So dealing in Nigeria before that time, nobody knew if I was alive when I got to the airport. Then I moved back to SA and I joined Nando's, which you might be aware of if you like your spicy peri-peri chicken. I was the international brand manager, so I helped the launch of Nando's into India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all sorts of interesting territories. I then joined a company called Interbrand, which is a large brand strategy firm. One of the first financial crises hit, and then none of our clients decided to spend money on branding. So I came back to South Africa and joined a company which did trend forecasting. I then moved back to Nigeria with TBWA, came back to South Africa and joined MTV as the head of marketing. So I launched Comedy Central into Africa, which was one of the highlights. And because I love classical music, being the head of marketing for MTV was really quite a surreal experience, because the music type really wasn't, suitable for me. But because I was so oblivious to the music, I made better marketing decisions, I think. I wasn't enamored by all of the celebs and things like that around us. So I just treated them like normal human beings. I was then brought back to Interbrand to run West Africa. And unfortunately, again, the next financial crisis hit, and that scuppered all of the chances in West Africa. And I then started Wunderbrand, which is a brand strategy business focusing specifically on emerging markets. And that's when I first got in touch with Sense Worldwide, because I saw what you guys were doing, even those early days. The whole concept of creative intelligence and using that hive mind of creative and different individuals around the world really spoke to me. And then lastly, I moved to Malaysia to set up a data science business. One of the problems I find in the marketing and brand world is that we are still not integrating enough data and analytics into our work. So we're not going to be taken seriously if we don't move into this new era of data science and understanding AI and machine learning. And it's not as complicated as people think. We do it in our everyday lives. We call it heuristics. But I've been in Malaysia for almost 2 years now. It's been an interesting journey working across the States and Southeast Asia. Been a very interesting couple of years, I can tell you that.
Lots of different cultures, lots of different perspectives. But one thing you said really struck me a moment ago is when you were at MTV with a love of classical music, and you said you probably made better decisions because you had this outlier perspective, this sort of, you weren't a fanboy for the music necessarily, but you were there to do a job and you had more objectivity. I thought that was really fascinating. Tell us a little bit more about data science. I mean, for a lot of people, we hear this term and we just go, that must be guys in either white coats or maybe it's hoodies these days. But could you give us a quick definition of what data science is?
Well, data science really is statistics at the end of the day. The field of data science that I'm playing in and that I'm trying to make some advances in is creative data science. So similar to how websites 10, 15 years ago needed specialists in CSS and C++ and all sorts of different languages and HTML to create a website and get all the functionality you need. Nowadays, you've got Wix telling you can make your website in 2 seconds. You pull this here, pull that there, bring them together, and it's done. And data science is going the same way. In the past, you needed guys in white coats, people who stayed in the basement and went through enormous spreadsheets and SPSS, and you needed a heck of a lot of technical and statistical knowledge to be able to get any insight or get any feel for the data. What's happening now is a move towards something called auto ML and auto AI, which basically means the fundamentals of data science in terms of the algorithms and the science behind it has basically been codified. So similar to website design, you need a square, it needs to move along with the different size phones. The exact same thing is happening in data science, where the basic components have all been codified. And now what we need in data science is creative people to take all of this data, to take all of this masses of data and actually come up with something creative with it. So that's the area that we're in. So the data science, when you hear people talking about R and Python and all of these other concepts, that is still a core function for very specific businesses who are going into, who need to make something very unique or specific for themselves. But most businesses, and the businesses that we deal with, are not flying to the moon, are not doing driverless cars. They are doing things like fraud detection, and they're doing things like trying to understand their target markets better. And in order to do that, you don't need to be a mathematician. You need to be somebody who can think in a structured way, but also a creative way to look at these data catalogs that are now available and blend them in ways that have never been done before. So that for me is where data science is going. It's no longer, mathematics is good, yes, but we've got calculators now, we've got spreadsheets, we've got all of these auto AI and auto ML platforms which do the heavy lifting for us. So we are now transcending the science part of data science and moving into creative analytics or creative thinking in the data science space.
That's one of the best descriptions and introductions I've heard, and that was helpful for me as well.
Good, good.
So tell us a little bit more about the creativity that you apply to that, or on your projects. What's the edge that you bring to data science?
All of the I'd say 99% of the folks that I deal with in this area are IT professionals or are in finance. And if you look at the Myers-Briggs tests, you'll see that they are not in the creative quadrants. And this means that they are seeing it in a very systematic way, and they are seeing it in terms of how they were taught at university, or very, very linear processes. You've still got quite a lot of old school thinking in terms of data science. So the two things that I really focus on here is, one is something called a data odyssey. And the data odyssey is not technical at all. It's basically it's literally what you guys do, or any creative concept process. So the data odyssey is looking at a journey of data throughout the organization. So how is it created? How is it stored? Who's using it? How are they using it? And where are gaps in this data? And this is just looking at the process. So again, there are no tools used here. It's interviews. So it's lots and lots and lots and lots of interviews. And then we do recommendations in terms of what platforms or what systems you should use to help you get your data into a format, into a usable format, so that you can start getting insight out of it. The second part of it is something we call the possibility engine. And the possibility engine, you'll probably recognize. It is where we interview and have workshops with the LOBs. So this is your HR directors, finance directors, CEOs, C-suite. First of all, we start with the C-suite to try and give them a vision for what data science can do for their business. So we try and understand, we try and show them, these are case studies of what your peer businesses are doing. Here are some new technologies or applications of data that you potentially have in your business that are being used to leapfrog or are going to knock you off your pedestal. And I try and use a little bit of fear in this space, because none of these businesses want to lose their number one position or number two position. So you can't always go in with logic in terms of, this is a really great idea, this is how you apply it. You need to bring in that fear aspect. So once we've worked with the leadership team to create a vision for how data science can be integrated into their business, or what value it can create in their business, or how it might transform the actual business, not in terms of processes, but in terms of what they're offering, then we go to the next level, which is what I mentioned, the finance directors and folks like that, where we interview them and we do the post-its. We say, let's look at a user journey. How is your customer using your product, and how are they generating data for you? How are your internal teams generating data? How can we improve processes? So by bringing in robotic process automation or visualizing things. How about a dashboard of all your data for the first time? How useful would that be? And then we create MVPs, so minimum viable products, for each department. So for HR, it could be improving a process with an AI chatbot, or in the supply chain, they could be bringing in IoT devices. So there's no technology, no data science at this phase. It is purely coming up with generating concepts of how can you improve the processes in your department, and how is data going to play a role, and what data do you need, how fast should it be, all those veracity, variety, and so forth. Creating concepts for them and helping them understand how to use these new AI and machine learning possibilities that are out there. Because a lot of these folks are very smart and are not terrified of AI and machine learning, but it sounds like a totally different field to what they should be in. So we try and soften it and give it a more human touch on it, and what value AI is going to add to your particular role.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's certainly some parallels, as you pointed out, but even demystifying innovation. I mean, over the last 20 years, I'm pleased there have been more books published on it, and there's more education around innovation now. But at the beginning, there was a lot of time needed to be spent just demystifying it And most importantly, and our number one value with the Sense Network is be human. So just trying to tell it like it is and almost decodify things and make them very real. That can make a huge difference.
Well, you talk about there not being enough of this out there. I think that the course that you guys were running on this creative intelligence is exactly what's needed. I've looked for material, I've looked for case studies, I've looked for courses online to go to try and study how do I explain data science and integrate it into a business from a non-technical perspective. And there is none. All of these things on Coursera and Udemy and all of these other platforms, it all says, coming soon. They are all working out. They're all trying to figure out and work on it because it's a complicated process. Dealing with people is more difficult than dealing with algorithms. So I think what the work that you're doing in that space, I think has tremendous possibilities because businesses out there are dying to know how to apply data science in their business. But what is data science? And the word data science needs to be rebranded into something else because it's not data, everything is data. Science, you do hypothesis and testing and so on. But it's similar to, I think you might not have come up with it, but you could have that digital oxygen where everyone's going to be on mobile phones, digital. It's no longer digital, it's just life. Yeah. So that's just how life is. So data science is part of everyone's daily life. It just needs to be demystified and broken down into bite-sized chunks so people don't think that the robots are going to steal their jobs.
They're probably going to create more.
Yeah.
You mentioned a word which I'd like to zoom in on. You mentioned the word fear. But I know you also like to talk about failure. And so I thought it might be a good moment just to open up that topic and see what you might have to say about that, because it's the experience of it. And I mean, a lot of stuff has been written about failure, but I've never been that comfortable with it because I think the headline of failure it grabs you too much and almost puts you off. But actually, if you start to lift the lid on it, it can be a really powerful thing.
Yeah, I mean, failure and poverty are two of the things that push humans forward, I think, quite a lot. Poverty in terms of, wanting to improve your circumstances, and fear or failure is something that makes you rethink processes and rethink decisions. It either is something that you can use to improve your own performance or to share your skills and experience or your experiences with those so that they don't fall into the same trap. But the wonderful thing about failure is there's always new ways to fail. So you never get it right. So there's always a great opportunity to fail at something. But the thing with failure and something I've learned over the past couple of years is you've just got to push through. It can always be worse, as my father used to say. But I'll give an example of my trajectory. And I had a great start. So I've worked at fantastic companies. I've gone to wonderful schools. I've got a great network, and everything seemed to be going just swimmingly. I married a very beautiful woman. I've got 2 kids in that now. And she also thought I was doing swimmingly when we met. And I started my business with quite a clear concept. And the business grew from the first year from billing in the equivalent of sort of $500 a month to the high point where we were doing about $500,000 a month. So it went up quite dramatically. And we did everything right. I paid my people well. I brought in a very diverse team from the onset. I had a great way of training up my team. We worked all around the world. We did fantastic work. Made sure we focused on client delivery. And then the financial crises hit, and customers don't pick up your phone to pay bills. and you have to come up with creative ways to engage with customers. And you have a look at a business that was once a beautiful shining palace, which is now descended into a place where staff are unhappy, you're unhappy, families unhappy, customers are unhappy. And at some stage, there's nothing really you can do about it. A lot of things are out of your control. And no matter how great your systems and your processes are, if your business is not generating cash, you don't have a business. So no matter how wonderful things are, and in some cases it can be your own fault in terms of bad planning and so on. Other times it's just things like COVID-19. It's things like economic crises. And I think we've got to realize, I think a lot of businesses operate under the assumption that nothing is ever going to go wrong. Things will just continue, like stock markets, that will just continue going up and up until they don't. I think I've had to come to peace with myself that there's nothing more I could have done on it. It's just something like death and taxes. Those are the two things that you can rely on. But what it has done is made me much leaner in my subsequent businesses. So once you've lost so much money, you become slightly risk averse, which is one of the things that allows your business in the first place to grow, because you are slightly less risk averse. You're looking for opportunities. But now you start looking under rocks before you proceed. So you just have you have that 5 second or 1 second extra insight into what potential pitfalls might be coming along the way. And one of the big things I think the one big thing I've learned is don't sign any damn contracts that are longer than a month. So cell phone contracts, rental contracts, those are the things that are hidden costs over the long term. So cheap in the beginning, but more damaging in the long term. I've spoken to quite a few young agencies as well and tried to guide them. I've also closed down 1 or 2 young agencies because they started off on the wrong foot, and I could see that the founders or the folks involved would lose all their money very soon. There's this sort of you can see the writing on the wall, and sometimes you're very close to your business like a child. You're putting lots of passion in it, and passion at the end of the day doesn't pay the bills. So that's been quite an interesting journey. It's given me more insight into people as well, more insight into the financial industry as well, in terms of how there needs to be some adjustments in how they work, and how difficult it is for businesses to succeed. There are times where, okay, how am I going to pay salaries this month? This needs to be paid. There are very few people you can talk to about that, because as a business owner, you need to look successful. You need to look like you've got your hand on the tiller. And there's this, not this lie, but this veneer over most business owners that you just smile and say, wow, I had a great day, great month, etc. Whereas inside, your intestines are twisted up, causing all sorts of havoc. And there's not terribly much support for businesses that are okay but need support, or businesses that are starting out in a new direction. There's no playbook for this. So you need, I think, the support network for people who have failed, for other people, so that they don't fail, is something that should be out there. And you see, very rarely do you see anything about people talking about these failures until they're very successful, and then they're happy to talk about it. Yeah. And I think people would tread slightly more warily in business if they knew the stresses and strains of running a business.
Yeah, I think one of the easiest ways of spotting a fake is that person who positions themselves as having made it, and they kind of make it sound really easy and are just saying how clever they were.
Yeah.
That might happen 1 in 100, but usually scratch beneath the surface, and there's no story there at all, and it's all chutzpah. I think this has been one of the interesting things, and you talk about these businesses which are, I think there's a term for them, they're almost like zombie businesses, aren't they? They're not really growing, and if you're not growing, then you're probably dying. Yeah. But it's sort of sustaining it sometimes. We all know there's moments of risk where you're going to be exposed on this or you're going to be exposed on that. But and I think one of the things I've observed is, retail businesses have not had a good ride over the last decade, and COVID has come along and I think put some of those to rest or forced them to start to transform their businesses, however they choose to do that. That's a good creative challenge. But I think there are many other businesses out there as well that aren't really businesses.
Yeah, well, let's just look at the industry that I was in, advertising and branding, and I'm sure you've got a lot of experience in this space as well. There's that frog boiling saying where a frog, stick a frog in a pot and turn up the heat, and it'll it doesn't know it's dead until it's being cooked. And the branding industry and the advertising industry has been acting like the violinists on the Titanic, because the industry is completely changed and is completely evaporated. So what always astounds me is how many new brand agencies and how many new advertising agencies are popping up all over the place. And you'll notice that all of the templates for how to start an advertising agency, how to start a brand agency are out there. And that is the first sign that your industry is dead and buried, because as soon as it's all being codified, or as soon as somebody can replicate it and there's no barrier to entry, why are you going into that business? It's easy and it's no longer viable. And the point for a lot of industries is they don't know they're dead until the very last second when it's too late. So retail, I think retail has to fundamentally change. Online shopping has become much more immersive, much more useful. People understand the process now. It's not some strange activity. And even the online players have to change how they're operating now. In the beginning, you had all of these exciting things you could do on it. Now people just want to go in, buy their product, get out, and they want as little, weaving in between aisles, digital aisles as possible. And we're putting those blocks in again. So they're doing exactly the same mistakes as they did in bricks and mortar in the online space. So, and it's moving so tremendously quickly that I don't know how we're going to cope in the future, to be honest. I think if I look at my son playing Minecraft or Roblox and so, or whatever these things are called, they are talking, messaging, playing games, doing X, Y, Z. They really are a different breed. And they are going to expect things to happen in real time in a way that we can't actually understand, and also that we don't want to understand. We do not want the same shopping experience as these youngsters. So it's engaging with a network or with people diverse ages and diverse requirements is very important for businesses. Otherwise, they will completely miss the new wave and completely misunderstand what new consumers are looking for. And unfortunately, the age bands, I think you had millennials and you had all of these, the age bands are going to be yearly at some stage, because even these youngsters are not going to be able to pick up the next set of technology, which is going to be 1 year behind them, because they're going to enjoy their technology platform, because we like getting comfortable. So they're going to get comfortable playing their 5 things at a time. The next lot are going to want 20 things at the same time, or are just going to want one platform. So we don't know where things are going, but I do think that simplicity is going to come back again. There's too much, but who knows? I've got 2 young boys, and I've said, forget about Earth. Let's look at space. You need to get your mind ready for understanding what is life in Elon Musk's universe going to look like. So maths and science, very important, but physically you need to be, very fit, and you need to think about new concepts for the space generation, which I think is 10-20 years away. And I've started a mock site, which is about space fruit and veg deliveries, which is I find very hilarious, but I'm sure is very dull to other folks. But you know, the whole replicator concept from Star Trek, and that it is happening. I've already seen it, and we are thinking about small little things now. How can we increase retail sales by 2%? How can we increase likability of this advert, or how can we get more tweets and likes? People are thinking in a completely wrong, they're thinking here where the future is here. And I think your role is to start getting people to think you are thinking about unimportant, unnecessary things. You're missing the big picture. You're spending money in areas that are not adding any value to humans. Let's transform our thinking from likes and digital and the basics, and move now into what can we do to forward humanity into a new space. So that's the space I'd like to see myself in the next 20 years, is the space industry. And whether it's doing space canning for sausages or growing spinach, I think there's going to be a market for that. But we need youngsters to start thinking beyond the things that they're being taught now, which is, I look at my kids, I'm thinking I'd just rather teach you at home my thinking and what you should be doing, rather than going and doing accounting. So all of these things are going to evaporate in 20 years. Gone. We don't need them.
I could not agree with you more. It's all about reframing the future, really understanding what's important, what's going to be important for humans. And the big thing you touch on there is education.
Yeah.
I mean, even education needs reframing fundamentally. I mean, the skills that we are being brought up with and told and conditioned to believe are important are not important. And the one thing that often is educated out of people and is that creativity, is that ability to think bigger and think differently. And that is the most important skill, is because it's like you said earlier, it's like poverty and failure. You sort of have to stare those in the face, and then that forces you to think differently. But we almost get a little bit too comfortable, and we forget that there are some pretty primal drivers there. But if we can take care of those, we can have an awful lot of fun creating some very cool stuff. And that's probably enough to fill a lifetime, unless we start living longer.
Absolutely. And just on that education thing, because it really rags me, especially since I look at how my kids going to be useful human beings. The current education system, even at the elite level, is going to create generations of undereducated and poor people. Because if we look at Europe, I mean, Asia and Africa, which are now starting to get their education systems up and running, they are 200 years, they're using 200-year-old education techniques that we are currently using now at universities and so on. So they are going to be completely unprepared for the space generation, or this next generation. And you'll see, I'm sure, a lot of the wealthy folks in the States and Europe and that, their kids aren't going to university. They're doing internships. They are learning new things. Having a degree is now not what it used to be. So again, if everyone can get it, it's not valuable. So, and that's an issue that people need to look at in the education space. And I don't think anyone except the Finns, perhaps, are getting it right. And we need to go back to we need to add in more creative classes in schools, understanding the classics, knowing history, music and things like that, because that's what expands your mind. Just give youngsters a broad palette in their minds that they can craft anything they want by listening to music, by understanding how to build things, versus teaching them things that you can ask Google for, really.
So then that begs the question, what types of people will you be hiring in the future? What will you be looking for, or what do you look for now, maybe, in terms of experience and education?
So I'm not practicing what I preach always. So I need to just put a caveat there, because we still operate in this old operating system. But what I try to do, obviously, I look for aptitude. I look for people with a good attitude. We've got a learning mindset, and I tell everyone who joins us that you're going to be, once you leave us, you're going to be way better than when you came in. So that is my mission and my promise to anyone who comes in. You will be ground down in terms of your psyche to make sure that your mind is open to new ideas and to thinking creatively. We do obviously hire an inordinate amount of actuarial scientists and engineers and so on. And that's where the struggle comes in. That's why I'm CEO and they're not, because of the creative thinking. Because they're all thinking, everyone's thinking in a similar way. But what I would like, and I was chatting to my wife about it the other night, is I think the apprenticeship concept needs to come back. And it means a difference in hiring in terms of how you hire, because I want young people with aptitude that will have 4 to 7, 4 years typically learning processes, learning a process, and then they are useful human beings. I think right now you've got executives with 1 year, 2 years experience. They are no use, really, and it's bad for them. I think the new process is creating a generation of managers who can't manage anything.
Really, you're talking about people who have lived a little. I guess you want people who have been through the mill a little bit.
That, and also people with a completely open mind to learn new things. Because if you cannot reformat your hard drive, or you can't put a new operating system, like Apple does every 5 minutes, you're going to be stuck with the dinosaurs. So there are going to be, again, two types of roles. One is going to be those who are operating on systems. So you need those. So to be on your data science platforms and things like that, where you need technical knowledge, you need to be able to move from one to the next as there are new versions of it. So you have to continuously learn. So part of your role, I think about 10 to 20% of your working time is actually upskilling just to do your job. And then there are those who are going to, in the manufacturing or other fields, who are going to be focusing on just improving processes and working on, creating things. And I think that's a bit of a lost art. And I think the Americans are waking up to that now, where they're bringing manufacturing back to the States, because you need people who are working with their hands and working with real things. We are going very digital, very esoteric, but people, we're not in the virtual reality world yet, where we can all sit in a holodeck and enjoy sunsets like that. So I think there's going to be that dichotomy between the doers and the makers.
I agree. And I think sometimes you can almost think about the organizational chart, as that's been shrunk down from a conventional looking pyramid. There's almost half of it left, because the consultants have made it more lean, and a lot of other things have changed over the last decade or so. But what you used to have in those businesses was, before all the efficiency drives in, you probably had more sort of slack space where people could be a little bit more creative, or they might go out for lunch, or they might have a drink at lunchtime, and that conversation might open up a completely different. I'm not saying that going out at lunchtime and drinking is acceptable.
Bad, Jeremy.
I just know the environment that I first started working in, came into the workplace. And what I think you've got now is what you were saying. There are the sort of the makers and the doers, the people who are running the business, and then almost a lot of that creativity is gone. And where does that now come from? And I think that's the real value for us of that, just what you've been talking about in terms of that creativity and that ability to see things differently. It's like that's what you need for driving that. And we've spoken to lots of very large businesses who have that problem. They are great at recruiting people who do very specific things for them, but they can't attract the people who can think creatively for them because they don't really create the right environment for them to be creative. And I think one of the things I was hearing you saying was, and if I got this wrong, correct me, but it's that ability, that learning to learn is really important. So actually, when you come back to failure, it's not you that's failed, it's the skills often that you've got that have failed you. So that's the thing that if you've got the right attitude and that ability to learn, it's just, like you said, updating your operating system to tackle that problem in a different way and coming at it in a different way, and just going into another iterative loop, another version of what it was. And as you said, you mentioned earlier, you look under the rocks. You take a few more seconds to look under the rocks this time round.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting time. I think hiring is going to be one of the most difficult roles at the moment. And to your point, talking to these big companies, they've got cash flow, they've got legacy invoices sitting there, so they've got money behind them. And I think one of but that creativity is a big problem because of the ossified culture of most of these places. And where I think sense makes sense is that you've got this hive mind of creatives sitting outside of these organizations. And I think people are going to become much more open to using platforms like yours, because we've got Iranians, Russians, and South Africans, and Malaysians, and China, a whole bunch of different people working with us. But we also utilize people from all around the world working in projects, and they are used as subject matter experts for when their specific needs are, where their specific skills are required. The ability for us to use great minds around the world for projects has never been better than it is now. And I think you guys were one of the first to start this process. And I think the opportunities in this space to utilize subject matter experts and to help companies be more creative, because creativity is what pushes us forward. It takes us out of reality into some crazy space and allows us to challenge ourselves. And for me, we're not challenging ourselves enough. We're doing little incremental changes, which is the Japanese's fault with their Kaizen approach, where just small little changes the whole time, which is great. But sometimes you just need that confluence or that consilience moment where everything comes together and you have this huge leap forward. And I think we're focusing too much on the weeds and not enough on the woods. And companies or individuals who are thinking about changing lanes completely into going away from the day-to-day grind into looking at where the future is going to take us. We're going to see things we have no idea, that we couldn't even imagine in the next 10 years, I think.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm very pleased that probably there's no one in the Sense Network who would be rather placed where we're all sitting. They'd rather be here on the outside, looking in, thinking about possibilities. That's probably what brings us all together. I'm pretty sure that's
ideas are scary, and you need people to be able to say it in a way that doesn't scare people too much, but gives them a bit of almost like a prophet. Give them a bit of a vision into the future and let them visualize it, because without visualizing it, most people can't grasp the concept. So I think that's a very important skill as well.
I think that's very good advice. So the purpose of the Sense Network is to make things better and make better things. Is there anything that you're working on where you feel the Sense Network could help you or provide a perspective? Or if not you, then what do you think what's the big challenge that we need to be looking at as a community?
I like the concept of leapfrogging, and the benefit of working in this part of the world is that there's we don't necessarily have all of the legacy infrastructure that you European folks and Americans have. We have the ability to change our thinking and go into new and sidestep the mistakes that you folks have made in terms of infrastructure, in terms of technology choices, education. And I think where sense could definitely play a role is for countries that are emerging out of their cocoon almost. What is a vision for the future for them? So I think government and health and education are areas that need to be focused on, and specifically as we touched on education earlier, but health as well. Why shouldn't everyone be able to? Doctors are great people, but our mind is being constricted to saying this is what this role does, and they can only deal with these kind of problems. With data science, with machine learning, we can think about new ways to deal with healthcare challenges. So how do you deal with places with healthcare challenges where you can actually change the mindset of people or create a new mindset of people before they get stuck into a traditional developed market medical system, which is terrible. There's new and better ways of doing that. So how can you bring in the local culture into in terms of how caring and how supportive the community works into healthcare and into education. So I think those two areas, if you want to make a difference, that's an area to focus on, healthcare and education. Just small things,
but so important.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, thank you so much. It really has been. It zoomed by.
Yeah.
That time together, and we touched some really fascinating topics. So thank you very much for sharing your journey and telling us a little bit more about data science, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yeah, always great chatting, Jeremy. And I look forward to a Sense Moon or Sense Mars conference soon.
That's not a bad idea.
That's what they pay me for, so.
A Zoom on the moon.
That brings us to the end of a great conversation with Nick. If you want to learn things that you can't Google and are interested in joining the next Creative Intelligence training course, please get in touch. We will be back soon with another mind-expanding and inspirational conversation, even if it's not a Zoom from the moon. Thank you for tuning in to Extreme Perspectives from the Sense Network. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. If so, please share it with your friends. We'd also love to hear what you think, so please leave us a comment. In the meantime, you can follow us on Instagram @The Sense Network, and if you want to get hands-on and collaborate on a project to make things better and make better things for people and the planet, join the Sense Network, linked in the description. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to next time.